everything belongs to God. Like we're just stewards of it all, particularly money, right? Steward is just synonymous with manager. He expects us to do something with what we've been given, even beyond money, right? Just the opportunities and the blessings that he's given us, right? He expects us to do something with it, right? Which represents faith. Hi, I'm Justin Buonamo, and this is Wisdom is Wealth. Wisdom is Wealth is designed to give you guys practical insights, modern strategies, and even timeless philosophies around gaining wisdom in your life. The wiser we get, the wealthier we will become. This podcast really is inspired by the book of Proverbs in the Bible, which was written by King Solomon, who prayed to God for wisdom and as a byproduct became the wealthiest person to ever live. If he was still alive today in present day, he'd be worth $1.3 trillion with a T. Not because he prayed for wealth, but he prayed to God to give him wisdom. And as he grew wiser, as a byproduct, he grew wealthier, particularly financially, but not just stopping there, in every facet of his life. And in my own life, I have realized that the wealthier I become, it's truthfully just because I have become wiser in life. I'm gonna bring on guests that are incredibly successful, incredibly amazing human beings, and have an amazing financial wealth that they've grown for themselves. And they're gonna share wisdom on their life experience in totality in hopes that something becomes valuable for you to implement in your process, in your life, and in your journey, and see how wisdom truthfully is wealth. Welcome back to another episode of Wisdom is Wealth. Today, the title of today's episode is called Investment Advice from Jesus. And he does give investment advice inside of the Gospels, particularly the parable of the talents, which is Matthew 25, verses 14 through 30. So I'm going to tell the parable of the talents, right? And then I'm going to point out 4 to 5 ideas or points, if you will, throughout the parable of the talents that really shows us what God expects us to do, not just with money, but investing. And it's really eye-opening, really cool to hear it this way. So hang with me. Like, I think you guys are going to really enjoy this episode because I think there's just a lot of confusion, like I always say, in the faith base or the Christian space around money and what God truthfully is calling us to do. Because yes, prosperity gospel is very prevalent, but what might be even more prevalent is poverty gospel. And so topic for maybe a comparison and topic for a future podcast episode. But I'm going to provide some serious clarity, I think, today here on what God truthfully expects us to do with money, particularly on the investment side of things. And so the parable of the talents basically is a story that Jesus tells in the Gospels that goes a little bit like this, right? A master goes on vacation, and this is a wealthy master, and he leaves a particular amount of talents with 3 different servants. And talents were like their form of currency back in the day, right? And so servant number 1 got 5 talents. Servant number 2 got 2 talents, and servant number 3 got 1 talent. So simply put, servant number 1 got the most money, servant number 2 got the second most money, and servant number 3 got the third most money. And this was, as the gospel says, based on their ability, which I'm going to come back to, right? So they were all, the amount of talents or money that they were given were based on their ability, based on what they have proven and have done from a financial management standpoint leading up to that point. And so as the story goes, right, the master then comes back and he's kind of like, yo, what's up? Where's my money? Like, he expects it to get his money back and wants to see what they did with it, aka how did they grow it? The first servant runs up to the master and is just like, Master, I doubled your money. And he says, well done, good and faithful servant. The second one runs up to the master, same thing. Master, I doubled your money. Well done, good and faithful servant. But the third servant, all he returned back was what he was given, because out of fear, he buried the talent and did nothing with it and only gave back what he was given originally, right? And so he was rebuked, something along the lines of calling him lazy and wicked for his actions. And not only that, as a result, he took the talent from that third servant and gave it to the first one, or gave it to the one who produced the most. Right. So a bunch of points here. Right. So let me just kind of recap, and then I'm going to go into I'm going to highlight some particular points here. Right. So 3 servants were given money. Right. First, based on their ability. Servant number 1 given the most. Servant number 2 given the second most. Servant number 3 given the least. Right. Servant number 1 and servant number 2 both doubled the money. Right. But servant number 1, since he was given 5, he doubled 5, which was why he produced the most. Servant number 3, out of fear, not out of faith, out of fear, buried the talent in the ground and only returned what he was given. He was rebuked, called wicked and lazy. And then not even that, the master took away the talent and gave it to servant number one who made the most, right? And so there's a lot of things in the Bible that, I think we can break down and interpret different ways, but I'm pretty sure that this one leaves very little room for interpretation. But even with that, let's go through some points here, right? The first thing is that everything belongs to God. Like, we're just stewards of it all, particularly money, right? Steward is just synonymous with manager. And so God expects us to do something with what we've been given is the first point here, right? He expects us to do something with what we've been given, even beyond money, right? Just the opportunities and the blessings that he's given us, right? He expects us to do something with it, right? Which represents faith, right? And represents gratitude. And so, as you saw clearly in this example, God expects us to do something with what he has given us. And so if you're someone listening to this who is not tending to your finances to the best of your ability, let alone possibly neglecting and ignoring them, right? I don't think that's what God is calling us to do with our finances. All right. The second thing is God values investing, multiplication, not maintenance. So that's the second point here. It's obvious that God values investing, right? And he wants to see us multiply, not maintain. He created us to multiply. Think about us from like a genetics biology standpoint, right? Like me as a male or us as males, we carry a seed, right? You as women, you carry an egg. Why? So we can multiply, right? So God expects us to multiply, right? Not maintain. And so he honors productivity over passiveness. I'm not saying productivity to hustle and hustle culture and working out of haste, because the Bible also says not to do that, right? But as good stewards of what we've been given, we need to be productive with it. He wants us to multiply, not just maintain. Maintaining in many ways is losing, right? Is declining. And so that's not from a hustle standpoint, right? This is clearly just what is being shown in the parable of the talents. The third thing is fear-based decisions do not honor God. Fear is not faithfulness. This might be a little bit radical, but I've heard before that fear is just a form of atheism. And if you think about it, it can be true, right? Because in the Bible, right, let's just resort it back to the Bible, God constantly says, don't be faithful, or don't be fearful, be faithful. Don't be fearful, be faithful. Multiple times in multiple different ways, right? And so if God is clearly telling us to not do something, which is be fearful, and we do it, right? That is at least sinful. And over times, just practicing something consistently that the Bible says not to do can show up as a form of atheism. And so again, I don't want to be out here just distorting the word and starting rumors here, if you will, right? I want to tie this back to scripture, but I think no matter what, I think we can agree that God calls us to not be faithful, but instead be fearful. It's throughout the entire Bible. And so fear-based money decisions do not honor God. If anything, actually think about this. It's making money the idol, right? Money is not the root of all evil. Idolizing it is, right? That's where it goes wrong, is when we idolize it, because you can only idolize one thing at a time. And so if you're idolizing money, guess who you're not leaving room for? God, right? And so most people think that if they're in the clear when it comes to idolizing money, if they're not putting their worth in it, right? They're not putting their identity in it. They're not constantly hustling over it and care about materialistic things. They're like, you know what? I'm good. I'm idolizing money. Well, here's a little bit of a perspective shift. If you're constantly obsessing over money, right, because you're not managing it well and it's always tight, it always feels like it's paycheck to paycheck, you're in some debt and it's just constantly looming over your head. It's the first thing that you think about when you wake up in the morning. It's all you're thinking about on date night. It's all you're thinking about when you're with your kids. It's all you're thinking about when you're at church. Guess what's happening? You're idolizing money, right? And that's what happens when we make fear-based decisions with our money, right? We end up idolizing it in I think a much more common way, right? For that people do actually idolize money by constantly obsessing over it, right? So if you're in the clear about, not putting your identity in it and not hustling hard and wanting to get money for all these earthly blessings and get people to pat you on your back because you got a lot of money and you look cool, then great. But if you're constantly obsessing over money because your fear-based decisions led you there, then you're also idolizing it, right? Number 4, right? I think the biggest thing is that when we don't take care of what we've been given, it comes with consequences, right? Basically, neglecting what God has blessed us with comes with consequences. Not because God runs a reward or punishment system, right? When it comes to stewardship, hear me when I say that. Hear me when I say that. I'm going to clarify here, as I always do when this topic comes up. By no means am I preaching prosperity gospel, which which means you should pursue God because he wants to make you rich. You should pursue God because he's just solely for the objective of becoming rich, right? That's not what I'm saying here, right? I'm also not saying that when you're bad with money, God punishes you. Stewardship is not God's reward system, it's its protection system, right? Because if you're not ready for more, then it's going to hurt you to receive more. God is going to protect you from that, right? God is, a lot of times when it comes to financial blessings, God's just waiting on us, right? And so, but I think neglecting what we have been given comes with consequences, not because it's a punishment system, but because there's this thing just also called cause and effect in life. If you do something enough over time, it's going to lead to a particular outcome. If you neglect your finances long enough, it's going to lead to a particular outcome. But think about it like this. Let's just tie it back to the word with the parable of the talents. What happened at the end when the third servant was found out to not have multiplied his money, acted out of fear? They took the talent from him, the consequence of his action, and gave it to who? The person that multiplied the most, a positive consequence of their action, right? And so neglecting what we have been blessed with eventually is going to come with consequences. This isn't reaping fear into you. This isn't saying that God's punishing you, right? But it's just, for one, what the parable of the talents is showing. And for two, it's just cause and effect. You do something long enough, right, you're going to reap a result that's correlated to that input. And then the last thing here is going back to the beginning of it, right? They were given according to their ability. It literally says that right in the word, right? And so the first servant, almost lost the word there. The first servant was given 5 talents. The second one was given 2, and the third one was given 1. And they were given based on their ability. Right? What that means in some ways is that they were given based on how they have stewarded their current situation leading up to that, right? The result or the consequence of their actions leading up to that moment. Okay, servant number 1, you've been a good steward of your finances up until this point, right? The consequence, the positive one, or the result or the fruits that you bared was you get the most. The second servant, you've been a decent steward up to this point. You get the second most. The third one, right, as you guys can probably guess based on what he even did with the talent, right, that he had been the worst steward leading up to this point, or not a very good steward of his finances, right, and was given 1 talent as a reflection of the ability. And so, again, God isn't running a reward punishment system. At the same point, it's a protection system, right? Like, God won't give you something where the rewards or the risk would outweigh the rewards, where it's going to hurt you more than it's going to help you. And a lot of times, because leading up to this point in our life, we haven't proven, I hate to use that word, but I'm going to use it. We haven't proven that we're quality stewards of our current situation. We haven't given it a faithful effort to honor what God has already given us, which is a big reason why more is being held back. Again, not prosperity gospel, not because God runs a reward system, but that's just protection, right? Like I've said before in past episodes, if you had a 16-year-old who couldn't back the car out of the driveway, you probably wouldn't let them take that on the highway, even as much as they wanted to. You probably wouldn't let that happen. That's not punishment. That's wisdom and protection. And God's the same way when it comes to money. And so I just want to recap, these 5 points here before we end this episode, right? And so this episode title was Investing Advice from Jesus. The first is that we're just stewards, aka managers of stuff, and God expects us to do something with what we've been given, right? Not just hide out of fear. Number 2 is God values investing. He wants you to multiply, not just maintain. Number 3 is that fear-based money decisions do not honor God. They are not biblical. Fear-based money decisions are not biblical. It says all throughout the Bible. Don't be faithful, or don't be fearful, be faithful. Don't be fearful, be faithful, right? And so a lot of times your fearful money decisions lead you to a form of idolization of money because you're constantly obsessing over it, because you got yourself in such a tight spot and such a bad spot because of constant fearful decisions year after year after year after year being made, right? And so God does not honor fearful financial decisions, right? Number 4, neglecting what we have been given leads to consequences. And number 5, we are given, or doors are opened up, opportunities and blessings are given based on our ability, based on what we have proven to be able to steward well, if the opportunity was opened up to us, if the blessing was given to us. And again, the last time I'll say it, probably the 6th time this episode, not prosperity gospel, not because God's running a reward system, it's a protection system, right? And so I've seen that play out in my life year after year, right? Where the better I steward my current situation, the more opportunities God opens up for me because he knows it's going to be in the best interest of me and my family and not hurt us more than it would help us. And so I hope that this is clear here. And so what I want to do on the next episode that I'm probably going to shoot, it's probably going to be on the topic of prosperity gospel versus poverty gospel, right? And so it'll really clarify some of these points. But before that, like I told a group of people I taught the other night, I had a couple of hundred people on a live call with me, which was amazing. And I told them, I was like, don't listen to me when it comes to investing. Listen to Jesus. Listen to God. Go to the parable of the talents. Read it, right? Think through it, pray on it, and see what comes up for you further after this episode. And so I appreciate y'all so much. I hope this episode was helpful just to really just, like I say, open up your eyes to what God is truthfully calling us to do with money, right? No, he doesn't want us to idolize it, but he also doesn't want us to ignore it, neglect it. So what's the happy medium, right? What's the happy medium? What is God, or really, what is the truth, I'll say, instead of the happy medium, right? Because no, we don't idolize, we don't want to idolize money, right? We don't want to make, money our master, right? But at the same time, we just can't sit around and do nothing and neglect and ignore money. There is a way that God calls us to manage it, to steward it, right? And I think it's littered throughout the Bible, the parable of the talents being one of them. And so at JFF, my company, Journey to Financial Freedom, where we do financial coaching for the faith-based and ambitious, we have a program called The Good Steward, where number one, helps you understand what God actually wants you to do with money. And then we help create a custom plan around that in your unique situation and just help you implement it and go out and do it. Right. And so if that's something that you need, navigate to our website, right? journeytofinancialfreedom.co without the M.co. And you'll be able to read a little bit more about the company, the program, and there'll be a link on there to book a call with one of my team members if you want to ask some questions about how the program could particularly fit you and your unique situation. We would love to field that call. And so if you're just someone that's faith-based, you feel a little bit stuck financially or on your next financial move, and you want to grow your wealth, you want to learn how to manage your money, but in a way that honors God based off biblical principles without all of the outdated, fearful, and restrictive feelings finances usually brings on people, go to the website, book a call, chat with one of my team members, and we would love to be able to help you with this. Because this podcast, I know I'm a little bit biased, but I know it's great with the information, and I hope you guys feel the same way. But at some point, we have to actually do something with the information that's being given to us, right? Like God expects us to do something, like not even just with talents, but you're being given information, insights, right? Education. We have to move from intellectualizing things to actually embodying them, aka move from hearing things and understanding them to actually doing them. That's what wisdom is. It's understanding what needs to be done and going and doing it. And so thank you all again for coming back to another episode of Wisdom is Wealth. As always, like, subscribe, and please share this episode. I know I say that every episode, right? Because I really do think that there's somebody out there that can benefit from it that isn't directly listening to it or maybe would not hear it without you sending it to them. At the same point, though, this is a topic I do really think needs to be spread. And so if you know somebody to send this to, please do. And we'll see you in the next episode of Wisdom is Wealth.